Hello again, and welcome back to Onfleet's Cannabis Series for 2022. We're here today with Andrew Watson, the CEO and founder of Cabbage Analytics. Andrew, it's great to have you on. How are you?
I'm well. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no, of course. I guess, let's just start off with the basics. Can you tell us about Happy Cabbage and what you guys do?
Yeah, so Happy Cabbage Analytics makes revenue easy for cannabis retailers by using the power of data science. So what we do is we plug in with the systems that the cannabis retailer is leveraging. That includes their point of sale system, includes systems like Onfleet. And then what we do is we provide predictive intelligence to using that data to the retailer in the form of like one-click buttons that can help generate revenue. That can include things like marketing campaigns. That can include things like in-store product recommendations, working on some stuff associated with bud tender training. But really, trying to remove all the charts and graphs and numbers from the equation and really just trying to make it like, hey, here's a opportunity for you to obviously make $5,000 of incremental revenue today. Click the button and make it happen.
Gotcha. Cool. I want to get more into how that works, but first, I'd like to just hear a little bit about your story. Like, how did you come to this space, and what was the sort of the genesis of Happy Cabbage?
Yeah, so I'm out here in San Francisco. I've been, in the tech space pretty much since I left school. Have a educational background in data science econometrics. So always kind of had, good amount of experience in tech. Always super interested in the cannabis space. Grew up obviously with a lot of cannabis in my life in high school and stuff. And so when adult use was passed in California, I started doing some kind of like side consulting, analytics consulting for a East Bay delivery service, and found out really quickly that hey, the systems this business is using, small business doing like 30 orders a day, are incredibly rich in the amount of data that they have in them. The only problem is that the operators don't seem to realize that and don't seem to understand the value they can get out of it. And so me and my my buddy at the time, who's now our CTO, Bobby, did like a little bit of like an analytics consulting engagement. So we thought of ourselves as like a McKinsey or some other like an Accenture, like, going in, pulling out the data, putting together this really nice PowerPoint deck. And when the business owner that we were working with saw the PowerPoint deck, he was like, this is really awesome. We have things like, margin optimization and price elasticity of demand curves and survival curves and churn calculations. And he's like, but I don't understand any of it. Can you just tell me what to do to make some money? And so we were like, oh yeah, I guess like the data is showing us that you have this like large group of customers who are like late. Like they've ordered every 20 days, but now they've fallen off. You should probably like market to them. Cool.
Right.
How do I do that? And we were like, okay, well, we'll make it so that you can like text the people through the data, like through the dashboard, right? And his business ended up really taking off from there. And it was actually a couple years later that we really came together and realized like, whoa, like we really have something of value where we're approaching the data side of the space, but really focusing less on like market research and data aggregation and much more on like prescriptive actions that can be taken using customer information, at that dispensary itself. So that's kind of how we got into the space.
Okay, gotcha. That's really funny, and it makes me wonder how many people who are watching that kind of presentation from a consultant are just sort of smiling and nodding, and then not actually understanding what to do with the info. I guess can you tell us a little bit more about the tools for marketing and operations that you guys make and use today?
Yeah, so we have 3 active pieces of technology and a few others that we're working on. So our primary one, which we call Polaris, is a targeted text message marketing tool where we use machine learning to basically automatically identify the balance between individual consumer buying patterns, so order frequency and latency and preference, and then also data on, hey, of all the messages that we've sent people during certain parts of their cannabis consumption journey, what are the moments of time that get them most likely to convert? And so that was a lot of words, but basically what it is it auto segments and auto identifies the groups of people that you should be reaching out to today based on their ordering patterns, and then predicts how much money you're going to make by reaching out to them today. And so that's the marketing tool, right? And then we have an operations tool, which, simplifies a lot of the data for retailers. That's where we pull in a lot of data, like we can match your Onfleet data with your like POS data. So if you want to know, like, hey, I want to see a delivery map of my delivery times for my edibles sales, my edibles purchases or consumptions like that, you can look at that on like an actual visual map. And then we also have just recently rolled out a product recommendation tool, which basically using the same sort of like preference math that we use on the targeted marketing, use that to come up with what products you should sell a customer in store in real time based on your active inventory, right? So really the idea is like we have a tool that uses the data to get a customer off their couch and into the store. We have a tool that can then use that same data to sell them what they actually want when they're in the store. And then a tool that kind of lets you measure all of that happen as it's happening.
Okay, yeah, that's really interesting. Can you talk a little bit? I want to hear about all the movies, but can you talk a little bit more about that last one? Like, what are the factors that go into that decision of like this is what you should be selling in the store right now?
Yeah. So what it is we're looking at the historical purchases of a given customer at that dispensary, and we're looking at what brands they're buying, what categories they're buying, what price points they're buying at. We're then also looking at like all of their quote unquote friends, right? Which is basically people who are buying things like them at rates like them, right? And then we basically take a look and say, okay, based on this person and all of their friends, here is the brands and price levels that they're most likely to purchase if they're in inventory. So then once we basically know, like, the preferences of this little group of people, that, we've identified that you're part of this group. It's called clustering analysis. I'm just bastardizing the explanation a bit. But then what we're doing is we're then looking at the active inventory on your shelf right now and saying, okay, now I know what this person wants to buy. Looking at your active inventory, here are the things that line up most closely with their preferences. And then what we do is we service that to like a bud tender. We also have an online API that you can service it. And then we see what that person actually buys after seeing that information. And based on what they buy after seeing that information, we know, hey, our guess was off by this amount. So make the next guess better.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. And so I guess I'm curious, like also what I mean, clearly you're collecting a lot of info about customers' behavior. You mentioned, identifying when they are likely to buy or when is the best time to reach back out to them. I know different people have different patterns of consumption, but I'm curious sort of like what lessons you've learned from observing and then collecting all that data.
What I've learned is we as an industry are still a little nascent in how we're thinking about how complex cannabis consumption is on an individual level. There's a lot of things where people are like, oh, like, we just want to grab everyone when it's been 30 days since they last shopped or 90 days since they last shopped or,
Right.
Sort of arbitrary numbers that we're applying to the entirety of the population.
Yeah.
Where in the reality is that the vast majority of the business is being driven by consumers who are buying every 7 to 14 days, which means that we know that they've dropped off their frequency by day 15, 16. We don't have to wait through. By the time you've waited 30 days for your best customers, your VIPs, you've waited too long. And also that, a pattern we see is it's not an instance where you basically have people who are shopping at one store and then they're shopping at another store and then they're shopping at a third store and they're shopping back at your store. So what you observe is them purchasing like once every 90 days.
Yeah.
That doesn't really happen. What more so happens is they'll shop with you, for 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 10 times. And then they'll go shop with someone else for that many times. So
Interesting.
basically, consumers are loyal temporarily to where they're purchasing. They're
Yeah,
not shopping around, they're loyal temporarily.
that's interesting. Is that I mean, is that just because people are looking for variety because they just want to like find new strains and stuff? Like that's an interesting behavior.
That is also, I do think that there are cuts of consumers who, and particularly the high consumption consumers, they're keyed in on a balance of price, category, and basically drain class, form factor, and THC volume by like best for the bang for the buck,
Hmm.
basically,
Gotcha.
right? So I do think it does have to do with either some negative experience or some perceived lack of product availability in whatever arena that they've decided that their preferences are in, moving them to something else. Maybe a deal from somebody else is grabbing them. But to your point, like on some level, we don't exactly know. Sometimes I'm actually surprised by how like loyal someone is, and it looks like there's not an obvious reason why they should have just dropped off, but they do.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Okay, yeah, that does make sense. It's yeah, it's just it's interesting that there's this, I mean, this relatively new industry to be able to dig down so much and start to like read into stuff like this is very cool. And so yeah, I also wanted to ask about the delivery aspect and your partnership with Onfleet. I mean, can you tell me just sort of like how does that look for the people who are actually like using these systems? How do you guys actually work with people who are out there delivering weed?
Yeah. So delivery is such a essential part of California cannabis in particular, and also essential part of cannabis in other states as more and more states are opening up, right? The future is a hybrid model, just the way the future is a hybrid model for all retail, right? Like, you go to any CPG, any retail and say, hey, what's your online e-commerce delivery strategy? And they don't have one. Like in this day and age,
Mhm.
it's a necessary thing to exist. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? And so, particularly in California, where it's always been a really thing that we've had for many years now, it's such an established and dominant part of cannabis consumption. And so, what we therefore built from the ground up was a system that assumed that delivery exists, right? So basically, for any given consumer, in order to truly map their preferences, in order to truly help a retail business understand their cannabis consumers, we need to understand how that cannabis consumer is interacting with the delivery business, which means we need information like when did this consumer place the order? How long after that was the order dispatched? At what point in time between dispatch and delivery, when was that order received? What other information can we glean about zip code? Can we glean about address? Can we glean about delivery times? Because that's such a key part of that cannabis consumer experience. And then basically, once we have that data mapped to the transaction and then the consumers, what of that information is powerful enough to service back up to the retailer in such a way that it's like super easy for the retailer to do something about it, right? So in the targeted marketing, for example, we have the ability to allow you to curate any segment by a zip code, by a city, and by how much of a delivery channel the consumer's leveraged. All of that data we get from OnFleet, right? That's
Mhm.
all data we get from OnFleet that we attach to the transactions in the point of sale system, because OnFleet has the richest source of information about the actual like physical interaction of purchase, on delivery, right? Same thing with, a retailer needs to understand, what their delivery time picture looks like if they want to be able to deliver, or pun intended, I guess, deliver, but provide a consistent cannabis consumer experience, right? So it's such fundamental, necessary data. So if you're basically trying to do anything with data without those components, you're basically walking around with one eye blind.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit more about, how this operates from the retailer's perspective? I mean, you mentioned like a single button earlier. Like, how does this actually look? Yeah, for retailers.
Yeah. So, we have the way it works is we have a couple like different apps that they can sign into. The marketing app is literally just it's like it lays out 5 buttons that are with dollars. It says, hey, promote flower, you'll generate $2,000 of revenue, write a message, click here, send, right?
Yeah.
It also allows you to go deeper. So it has more levers. So I was mentioning like what you can do is you can recalc every segment, all those buttons, but say go after people who have received delivery in these zip codes, for example, right? It also lets you basically build manual segments through a ton of really easy to use levers, and then provide some data on reporting on, how much revenue you've generated with campaigns, reporting on like how often a segment is purchasing, that kind of stuff. But it's kind of buried further into the tool. We try to start simple by just saying, hey, if you're coming into this with no data sophistication whatsoever, we want to provide you the easiest, most impactful way to use it now, right? Same thing with our product recommendation tool. It's literally like you select a customer, it just gives you a set of recommendations right then and there. If you want to learn more data, you can, but you got to click deeper. And then on our operations tool, same idea. Like it just starts by telling you, hey, here's your sales, delivery time, average ticket size, number of orders, top selling category and brand right now, right here. If you would like to go deeper, you can click in deeper and you can get to things like heat maps, like graphs, like more numbers, but really trying to start simple and going deeper from there.
Okay, yeah. So you do provide all of these, all the data and analysis. It's just the actionable stuff is presented right up front.
Exactly. Right up front, simpler, right? The way I like to say it is that, particularly for an audience, and I learned this when I was working at Salesforce, dealing with Salesforce executives a lot, honestly. Even if the graph you're showing is very compelling, by literally just putting a graph on there, you've turned off half your audience. Just by the
Yeah.
fact that they see that there is a chart, you're like, game over. You know what I mean? Like, so if you really want them to like understand and see information, it's like this human haptics thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's your eye goes to the brightest thing on the page and the biggest thing on the page, right? And if that big bright thing is a line chart, then okay. Like if you want the big bright thing to be how much money they're going to make, you got to make that the big bright thing, and you can't
Right.
put a chart in or it's a huge distraction. So
Yeah. As a member of that 50%, I really appreciate your approach, and I appreciate you taking it.
yeah,
Those of us who are not analytically minded. um, what's on that note? Like, what have you heard from clients and like retailers that you've worked with? Like, what have they said about the product, and then like, what have you kind of learned from working with them?
learned a lot of things. They've definitely said, some good quotes we've had about the product have really been, I see immediate impact. It's really easy to use. One thing I always love is when people come back and it's helped them understand more of what they can get out of their data. It's helped them understand more what's possible. Particularly in cannabis, when I was doing marketing analytics outside cannabis and healthcare, if we were spending money on something, millions of dollars of marketing on something, we knew and we had attached exactly how much revenue was returning from that marketing spend. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
What is that marketing spend getting you? How many impressions? How many clicks? How many signups? Right? This is stuff that Google and Instagram gives you out of the box.
Yeah.
In cannabis, that really isn't there, right? And so one of my favorite things my clients will come back and say is when you approach a client who's never done performance marketing before and you're saying, no, like every dollar you're spending in marketing, you should anticipate and expect dollars back in measurable revenue. Can I give you a tool that can make that really easy? So to bring you into that mindset, to bring you into that thought process, right? Really, it's where it's not like I'm spending $500 a month on this marketing channel. It's I'm generating
Right.
$5,000 of revenue a month on this marketing channel through $500 of spend, right?
Yeah. These are
Something
the
like that.
results. Yeah.
Exactly. And so clients, when I talk to clients and they're giving me feedback and giving me reporting back, and they're basically saying like, hey, well, these campaigns generated only this amount of revenue or something like that. That's what I love, because I think it helps bring the entire like data maturity of the industry up, and also helps it so that people like, they can expect to get value back from what they're spending money on, instead of just like throwing it into a dark hole thinking that that's all that they can do because they don't understand the capabilities of what's out there. So that's something I really appreciate, and like when we're able to help our clients become more sophisticated as a result.
Yeah. That's an important insight for any industry, really. Well, Okay, well, I mean, yeah, I just sort of, looking forward. I really like hearing people's thoughts on the future of this space and on the future of their companies in this space because it's such an interesting time right now. So, like, what about your company or just about the cannabis space in general has you really excited right now?
In the space in general, what has me really excited is just like two step forward, one steps back, but at the same time, it's still moving forward pace of opening up of new states, new markets, new folks, right? The majority of America now lives in a place where they can receive and access the regulated cannabis industry, right? I am excited for, 100% of America to be in that place. And,
Me too.
with the way things are, every new state is this like crazy new opportunity with this whole new cannabis culture that's coming online with this whole new way of kind of doing business, this whole new way of perceiving and interacting with the plant, with a whole new set of like where they're coming from culturally, and I think it's super exciting. You know what I mean? We are born and bred out of California, but I just think it's some of the most interesting conversations I have these days are like with like Michigan and Missouri and Oklahoma City and New Jersey and Maryland and Montana. It's
Yeah.
just it's so fascinating. And then for us in general, in that, like, one of the the primary reason why we entered the space, was, we saw the opportunity with data and data science in the space. There is an opportunity in cannabis to use data science in ways that just simply are not used in other industries, right?
Hmm.
I think there's a lot of times where we're like putting the bar as like, okay, we need to make this industry as good as other industries.
Yeah.
And we need to make this software as good as other software in other industries. But why we entered the space was really around you don't even, I worked in healthcare. I did healthcare data stuff, right, for a little while. Even in healthcare, you didn't have as complete this like data picture as we have and where data science technology is these days. There's a huge opportunity to go leaps and bounds above what other industries are able to do to meet consumer preferences right where they are, right? Basically, every small dispensary in America, through the systems that they're gathering about the information about the consumers, has the ability to match their consumers' preferences more than Amazon does. They have.
Yeah. That's interesting. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? Because that's a really interesting statement.
Yeah, well, so I always like to say this. If you think of cannabis purchasing like going into a bar and
Hmm.
buying alcohol, the equivalent would be if at the door, the bouncer checks your ID and then scans it into a system so we know exactly when you were at the front door. Then when you go up to the bartender rescans your ID, checks it again so we know the time it took you to get from the bouncer to the bar. And then when the bartender pours you, a beer, we know the state regulatory system ID of the keg. We know the volume in the keg, and we know the laboratory testing of the contents in the keg, and we know every single person that has touched and handled that keg, from distributor to manufacturer to grower, where we can literally identify the plot of land that the barley plant came from
Yeah.
that got into that keg, the data on what's in the keg, and then all the information about you, the consumer, that's attached to like your name, your phone number, date of birth, license, like gender identification, all of that kind of stuff, right? And then all of that is able to be leveraged and tapped by a small business, a small local business.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? Like that's, like I said, is massively powerful, right? And there's no reason why a small local business can't, with that information, just about their own consumers, match their consumer preferences almost exactly with that kind of information, right? Where other, industries, other places, other things, a bar doesn't have that much information. They can't do that. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So
Yeah. No, that's a good illustration. And that is Fascinating. Yeah, I mean that's very cool. It opens up a whole lot of possibilities, as you said, for small dispensaries. This has been really interesting. Thank you for your time. Before I let you go, yeah, just curious, if people are interested in learning more about Happy Cabbage, where should they go?
Yeah, so happycabbage.io is our website. Best to go there. We have you can sign up for an easy demo of the product. We have resources, blogs, guides, all kinds of things, data reports. And you can also find us on LinkedIn, Happy Cabbage, and Instagram, Happy Cabbage Analytics. So yeah, that's about it.
All right, Andrew Watson, CEO and founder of Happy Cabbage Analytics. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.